Good day to you, and welcome to my review of the 1997 science fiction horror film Event Horizon. I have been requested to review this by a very generous supporter on Patreon, so that is why you might be thinking it strange that I'm reviewing a movie that's over 20 years old and not the next episode of Doctor Who in line for review. I watched it around 4 or 5 years ago and deemed it good, so now I am revisiting the movie to examine it critically. It stars Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne and was written by Philip Eisner with direction from Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with the great Paul Thomas Anderson. When the words horror and science fiction are put together, the first movie that springs to my mind is Ridley Scott's Alien. Coincidentally, the original script for Event Horizon was deemed too similar to Alien because the premise surrounded the idea of aliens who haunted a ship. A script rewrite would see changes that made the story closer to that of a classic haunted house movie. Alongside this, the movie was rushed through production by Paramount due to a 6-month delay on James Cameron's film Titanic, which was being produced at the same time. With Paramount no longer having a summer movie, Event Horizon filled that slot. This speedy production and the negative screen test reception led to a 130-minute cut being trimmed down to a 90-minute film, the original cut being lost to the annals of film history. The writing seemed to be on the wall, and the film was a financial disaster, unable to make half its budget back. Since then, the film has seen a significant cult following from success on the home video market. So today, we'll be taking a deep dive into this classic film and see if it was as good as I remember it. I highly recommend watching the film before continuing, as I'm going to be discussing as much of this movie's qualities as I can. The film begins with typical overly optimistic Hollywood predictions towards the future of space travel. We then see a mixture of special effects ranging from gorgeous to questionable before the film strangely zooms into a corpse's mouth, turning into Sam Neill's eye. This establishes a relationship between our character Dr. Billy Ware and the remains of the Event Horizon ship. He believes his creative talent was responsible for the disaster, taunting him when he sleeps. His only solace is the memory of his partner that he seems to have a shrine of photographs of. Some are even duplicates, which shows how little care and attention went into this shot. To then see seconds afterwards possibly the most gorgeous and dizzying shot of the entire movie, you get the impression that the producers were more concerned about spectacle than anything else. Our character is then transferred to the Lewis and Clark vessel, manned by a search and rescue team traveling to the outer reaches of the solar system to find the missing Event Horizon ship. We immediately understand the gravity of Captain Miller's authority as he exerts his no bullshit attitude towards his crew and Billy's introductory small talk. Even the set design reflects his authority with this mechanical throne given exclusively to the leader of this crew. The team are then frozen in stasis for the long flight ahead of them. For some reason, Billy has a name tag on his chamber, as though they allocated a special one for him or put it on in case they forgot his name. He believes to have woken before the others, but is instead having a rather strange vision. It would at first appear rather creepy seeing his wife without any eyeballs, but unfortunately his rather odd scream turns horror into comedy. I do find Sam Neill's screams in this film rather humorous, but the slow build-up of this particular scream matched perfectly with his realization that he's waking up from a 56-day sleep entirely submerged in water. However, this recurring juxtaposition of horror with comedy is the first plague on this movie. After waking, one of the crew members named Cooper is going around offering coffee. I did cringe a little when he asked Lieutenant Stark if she would like something hot and black inside her. This establishes Cooper as the comic relief character who will throw this type of comedy in at the most inappropriate times during the film. Even Captain Miller has no idea why he's there.
What exactly is it you do on board this ship, Coop?
We're also introduced to Peters, another female crew member who was pulled from holiday leave with her disabled son left in the hands of her ex. Coincidentally, Kathleen Quinlan, the actress, also had to leave her son behind in America to act in this movie that was filmed in England. It certainly would have Stanislavski jumping for joy and makes her character stand out amongst the others in terms of performance and writing. I mention these characters because given what dark matters will later unfold in the film, throwing humorous elements into the story seems to throw confusion into how we should be reacting to what happens throughout. For example, they're all smoking in space. I have to laugh at the absurdity of this, otherwise I'm just left questioning why on earth this is allowed to happen. Billy then gives the faster-than-light travel explanation that is also seen in Interstellar. I've heard complaints from other people people that this explanation is rather baffling given how these astronauts should reasonably know about this stuff already. The characterization of some characters is a bit questionable, but I'd quite like the idea that these characters are more like workers than pioneers. Even their costumes indicate an interplanetary military called USAC as opposed to a collection of scientists. Interestingly, a deleted scene depicting some high-ranking USAC officials can be found on YouTube. I don't think it truly adds anything important though, as most of the exposition is delivered in scenes like this one. Space travel is so normal to these people that even the laws of relativity are something they're fully aware of. They already have the power to travel to Neptune in days. The prospect of traveling in hours though might seem enticing. The ship arrives at Neptune, and I'll give credit for the imagination going into this location choice. Neptune being the planet renowned for super fast wind speeds and its dark spot storms, this isn't exactly a place you would want to find yourself in. It certainly seemed rather precarious that the ships were able to keep themselves in orbit from within Neptune's atmosphere and didn't just get sucked in by its immense gravity. No explanation appeared to be given as to why they aren't all dead at this point or why they are unquestioningly entering Neptune's atmosphere. Fortunately, gravity does get put into the equation once they start boarding the event horizon. Floating gloves and liquid produced some interesting and unique moments in this tense, quiet segment of the film. With the help of gravity boots, one of the characters finds the most interesting bit of set design in the engine room. Just like the spinning zoom out from Billy's room scene earlier, the rotating blades in this corridor produce a dizzying feeling, accompanied by the sight of silhouetted spikes in the engine room and how the doors seem to have rows of teeth attached to them, gives our first allusion to this idea of the ship being alive and that this character Justin has just walked inside the belly of the beast. Once again, the set design is very impressive, seeing this revolving structure slow to a halt and blind this character. It does make you question what exactly these spikes were designed for, given that this all came from the mind of Billy. It also seemed a bit odd that nobody in the crew questioned him as to why this creepy design was all necessary for the gravity drive to operate. Our curious character then gets swallowed up into the machine, causing a lot of explosions to go off at once. It would appear as though this shockwave of negativity is what causes the characters to start hallucinating and brimming with existential doubt. We get another dizzying camera rotation when Cooper went in to rescue Justin before everybody was brought onto the event horizon. The gang starts trying to piece together what happened, and we have Cooper performing more of his
What exactly is it you do on board this ship, Coop?
antics.
Doctor, please, don't start in with that physics shit. I'm telling you, I saw it.
Then the leading characters go and have a closer look at the gravity drive. Stark argues that creating a black hole is dangerous, and it's no surprise that the Event Horizon's mission went to hell. The hypnotic power of Billy's creation is shown in this close-up on his eye, with the gravity drive reflected in his pupil. This was a nice visual reminder of the power the ship now wields. We then see the first hallucination from Peters, that of her own son being with her on the medical deck. In the original cut, there was also footage of maggots crawling all over his legs too, turning audience members away from the screen during test screenings. Anderson believed this was his first lesson in showing restraint. I quite like this moment given how the movie showed her child's disability earlier, seemingly indicating some kind of guilt she has towards him, be it from being absent from home or maybe the cause of his disability. The mystery is what makes this moment that much more sinister. The power outage sees a return to the gravity drive room where Billy enters a tight, narrow selection of green motherboards. I was confused by this, seeing as he is a self-professed claustrophobe.
Claustrophobic?
Very.
And is now shown to be crawling on hands and knees through this tight series of tunnels. Don't get me wrong, it's another testament to the great set design in this movie. I just think it might have made more sense if Captain Miller went in instead. Admittedly, this would lead to a very alien encounter, but considering the numerous references to other horror movies in this film, and the fact that Billy comes out in one piece, I don't think the change would have been too much of an ask. I definitely think this was one of the more frightening scenes though, given the behaviour of the lighting and the jump scare of his wife showing up. Thankfully, it wasn't accompanied by that famous scream of his. The characters start getting a little tense around each other in the ship. Here, Stark theorizes that the ship is alive. I like this idea in concept if we believe that its life force is how it manipulates the people on board. I say this because there is a scene right afterwards where something starts thudding on a door. Because multiple people see the impacts on the door, it's evidently not a hallucination. Therefore, something physically large is making those dents when the life force doesn't appear to have any physical presence at any other point in the film. It also feels rather cliche just to throw this scene in here without any payoff. Justin is then found in the airlock, and any attention paid to the thumping door thankfully gets thrown out into space. This is the part where they introduce the idea of the ship showing the crew the darkness inside them. It's quite a frightening idea, and it was great to see Justin being affected to such a degree that he would willingly kill himself to avoid facing his own shame. It was quite weird how they kept calling him Baby Bear though, even though it's over halfway through the movie and they didn't call him this once until this point. If Sam Neill was allowed a big embarrassing screen, Lawrence Fishburne got his in this scene. Moments like this and the Baby Bear Mama Bear nonsense just took me right out of the intensity that this scene was supposed to be inducing. We also got a messy combination of outdated CGI here as Miller performed these insane acrobatics in space to stop Justin from flying out of the airlock. It all looked so ridiculous to me, and the scene's ending didn't settle anything either. The moment Miller and Justin got back into the airlock, the rest of the crew all got in there with them instead of pulling them onto the ship and relative safety. The cherry on the cake of this whole fiasco was seeing Sam Neill having PTSD over his experience starring in Jurassic Park. After another group therapy session, Miller and Billy have a scene together.
Don't you walk away from me, mister.
Once again, the dialogue can feel like it's written for a comedy as opposed to a horror film. Miller becomes alone for a moment and is reminded of his own shameful act that he later describes to the medic DJ. This scene develops this theme of internal darkness wonderfully, in that even the strongest character of the bunch has his regrets and demons.
You ever seen fire in zero gravity?
This is probably the best bit of acting in the entire movie, and it shines out amongst the rest of the fairly lackluster or outright hilarious parts we've seen thus far. DJ's interpretation of the Latin dialogue was interesting too. The idea that the ship went to an inconceivable reality of evil and came back from it to wreak havoc in our own is just mind-blowing. Like Stark's theory of the ship being alive earlier, neither hypotheses are provable. All they have are these frightening experiences that cause totally bizarre behavior in our characters. I think all this played wonderfully to the intentions behind this film. In a San Diego Reader interview, director Paul Anderson said that what scares people always is their own imagination. You can never put something on screen that's as horrific as what people can imagine. Having these scenes of characters struggling to come to terms with their experience is frightening, creating such fantastical notions in the minds of the audience as well as the characters. No better is this idea demonstrated than in the gory orgy footage and later when Miller is mentally shown his crew strewn all over the engine room. In the previously mentioned interview, Anderson has said that viewers of Event Horizon have come away from this film claiming to have seen things that simply aren't in it. Their imagination did all the work. There are a lot of rather unique aspects within this range of disturbing footage. They hired porn stars and amputees with inspiration from the artistic works of Hieronymus Bosch and Peter Bruegel. These segments of the film are those that had the most cut out of, and were definitely the scariest parts of the entire film. Things do go a bit downhill though when the characters start evacuating from the event horizon. Smith and Peters grab some CO2 scrubbers from the engine room. This genuinely felt like a bit of a weak excuse just to get Peters to see the gravity drive and influence her to kill herself. If their evacuation was because of a concern for human life, why did Smith not turn around and realize that Peters had stopped following him back to the Lewis and Clark? They show a shot of her looking right at the drive from within the room itself, then cut to a shot of it without her, and then we see her go through the circular door frame. A great example of poor continuity. She then started hearing the same dinosaurs as Sam Neill, even though she wasn't in Jurassic Park. After Peter's death, Billy suddenly showed up in the engine room to complete his transformation. It's all pretty horrifying to see, and once again the mystery behind his partner's tragic death made it all the more sinister. Sam also got another nice big scream to boot. Then things started getting stupid again because all of a sudden Billy was in the Lewis and Clark despite just being in the engine room on the horizon. This gigantic corridor would have to be navigated in order to reach the vessel from the engine room, which Miller is seen running up and down in. The geography just starts getting so confusing when characters appear to teleport from one place to another without bumping into anyone. The culmination of this confusion was that Billy had somehow planted a bomb on board the Lewis and Clark. They introduced earlier this idea that in the event of a disaster, the crew of the Event Horizon could just blow up the long neck of the ship and fly away at the front. This assumes that Billy had designed the bombs so that they could be disconnected and activated elsewhere, which is not only a really morbid idea, but undermines the whole concept of the ship controlling him if he was just evil this whole time.
I want off this ship.
You can't leave. She won't let you.
You just get your gear and get back on the Lewis and Clark, Doctor, or you'll find yourself walking home.
I am home.
The same thing can be said of these spikes that seem to have no purpose in the engine room aside from impaling human beings. The execution of Smith's death was just laughable too. Before getting blown up, this guy is just seen staring with disbelief when the disarm button is right there in front of him. Captain Comedy Cooper, meanwhile, was stuck to a hunk of debris flying away from Neptune's orbit. It was at this point I felt the intention of the film was a comedy after all.
Here I come, motherfucker!
Combined with the terrible special effects and the fact that right afterwards we get one of the most horrific deaths in the film, I can safely accuse the film of tonal inconsistency. Not only does this film now show a lack of concern for the science fiction elements, but moments like this also seem to be working against the genuine horror that it's trying to produce. You watch Shaun of the Dead and you immediately get the impression it's a comedy. I could be wrong, but I've never known this movie to be recognized for having a comedic reputation. Only other movies by the same director seem to have this.
This is borderline experimental.
Miller then goes on a hunt for Billy and finds Stark unconscious, who seems to disappear for about 15 minutes of the film. The pair then find Billy in the captain's chair with his eye hole sewn shut, giving the exposition that confirms the ship gained life from another dimension. It's a shame that this character merely confirms our suspicions here, as the mystery of the ship as an entity was what made it so frightening. At this point I was just expecting our comic relief character to save the day, but then something equally unbelievable happened. Stark ran straight for Billy in the chair with this big metal thing in her hands. Instead of throwing it like a reasonable individual would, she runs right up to him, allowing him to grab her and throw her into a wall. God, imagine if that other bloke with the bomb was as quick on the draw as Billy is here. My expectations were then ironically met as Cooper miraculously landed outside the cockpit. He was shot away by that weird drill gun thing, resulting in everything getting sucked out into the vacuum, including Billy. Miller and Stark are able to escape, but believe Billy to have found a way back onto the ship. What a ridiculous idea, right? Doesn't matter. There are now a whole bunch of weapons just ready and waiting for our characters in case they need to fight. Lol. With 3 of the rescue team left, they put their plan of blowing up the ship into action. Stark and Cooper then get caught up in a blatant rip-off of The Shining, and I thought it was hilarious seeing Stark literally fall down from the top deck on her back and get up as though she's absolutely unaffected at all. This scene's extended version can be seen on YouTube, where Sam Neill is seen butt naked and crawling down the ladder like a spider. I imagine Stark would have reported this horrendous sighting to Miller in the original cut, but it's fairly clear from this clip that the dialogue was changed.
We're armed, she's ready to blow. I repeat, we are armed, she's ready to blow.
Miller, can you hear me? We have to get out of here, now!
Yeah, no duh. Miller then gets attacked by Billy, initially taking on the appearance of the flaming man who haunts him. This results in some of the most hilarious open source sound effects being used to detrimentally affect this scene's tone. This sadly isn't the only time in the film these effects took me right out of the story. But apparently the audio for the movie wasn't even mixed until the day before they flew it out for test screening.
The sound mix was bad.
So Billy somehow returns to the ship. Here's his explanation.
The ship brought me back. I told you she won't let me leave. She won't let anyone leave.
Given that the ship has been to a dimension of infinite possibilities, I don't find this idea to be too far of a stretch. The problem is that the concept just throws all rules out of the window. For some reason, the ship made Billy claw his eyes out, only to find another pair for him. He also appears to have used some form of sharp tool to claw his skin all over the place that he conveniently forgot to bring along to finish off Miller. Even with a new pair of eyes, Billy stands right behind Miller chanting, blind to the fact that Miller was reaching for the detonator. Far too many explosions later, we reach the epilogue of the film. I honestly don't see the purpose of this scene other than to suggest the darkness within us isn't going anywhere. Unfortunately, it's just a repeat of the scene with Billy from earlier, only now it's from the point of view of Stark, a character I honestly couldn't care less about. During those 15 minutes of screen time absence, maybe we could have seen what haunted her. For God's sake, even Dr. DJ got a slither of backstory. She got her own embarrassing scream, accompanied by this awful dubbing of Cooper's voice over the top of it all.
I got you, Stark. I got you.
It's okay.
I need a set
Stark, it's the rescue team. We're safe.
Okay, I need it now.
We're safe.
Where I was glad to realise the film was finally over. So, did it suck? It's undoubtedly ambitious, evidenced by its flirtation with some great ideas and set designs. It's clear that the production side of things turned this movie into a bit of a shit show, but I'm also glad it didn't hold back on the horror elements, and some of the special effects still hold up rather nicely today. There's a decent story in there somewhere, but a lot of the characters needed more meat on the bone, and the many genres this film tries to appeal to don't make it especially groundbreaking in any of them. It has muddled intentions written all over it stylistically and thematically. I know a lot of people enjoy this film, and I hope I've made it clear that I don't hate this movie, but to deny its flaws seems somewhat disingenuous to me. I give Event Horizon a 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching. What do you think of this movie? Comment below your thoughts or join us for a chinwag on my Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion.